Picture this, man, a town so quiet you can hear a pin drop. The kind of place where the loudest sound is the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. People leave their doors unlocked, trusting their neighbors like family. Kids play in the streets till dark, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. You know, the kind of place they make movies about. Right before everything goes to hell. A picture-perfect town with a dark secret lurking beneath the surface. Between 2015 and 2017, this one town, let's call it Maplewood, got a real-life horror story. A story that would haunt its residents for years to come. 7 victims, mostly young women, snatched away, gone without a trace, leaving their families in despair. The whole town's living a nightmare, fear gripping every heart. Now these weren't random acts of violence, they were calculated, methodical. This was the work of a predator, a hunter stalking his prey with chilling precision. And where'd he find him? Social media, man. The digital age's dark underbelly. This guy was slick, using fake profiles to lure these women in, pretending to be someone they could trust, promised them the world, then took everything from them. Their dreams, their futures, their lives. The cops, they were scrambling, trying to piece together a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Small town, small police force. They were out of their depth, facing a monster they weren't prepared for. They weren't equipped for this kind of terror. The resources were limited, the pressure immense. Every day, the pressure mounted. The media hounded them, demanding answers. Families grieving, the media breathing down their necks. The weight of the world on their shoulders. They needed a break, something, anything, to crack this case wide open. A glimmer of hope in the darkness. And then it came. Buried deep in over 100 hours of surveillance footage. A needle in a haystack, a clue, a tiny detail, but enough to change everything. The game was on. The hunt for the predator had truly begun. This wasn't your typical axe murderer, breaking into houses in the dead of night. This guy was smart, calculated. He understood the digital age, knew how to use it to his advantage. He'd create these fake profiles, usually posing as a successful businessman or a charming artist. Someone who on the surface seemed totally harmless. He'd target women on social media, usually those who seemed vulnerable, maybe a little lonely. He'd shower them with compliments, make them feel special, gain their trust. He'd weave these elaborate stories, spin tales of adventure and romance. He knew exactly what to say to draw them in. Once he had their trust, he'd propose a meeting, a date, a chance to finally meet face to face. He'd pick a public place, somewhere they'd feel safe, and then, just like that, they'd vanish. Gone without a trace. The first victim, Sarah, a bright-eyed college student, disappeared after meeting a guy from a dating app. Then came Emily, a single mom just trying to get back on her feet. Each disappearance followed a similar pattern, a connection on social media, a brief courtship, then silence. The police, they were out of their depth. They'd interview friends and family, scour social media accounts, chase down every lead, but it was like chasing ghosts. The killer was a phantom, leaving no trace, no witnesses, no fingerprints. The pressure was on, man. The media was having a field day, the public was demanding answers, and the families of the victims were desperate for justice. The cops, they were working around the clock, but it felt like they were losing ground. The killer was always one step ahead, disappearing into thin air after every crime. Months turned into a year, and the case went cold. The police, they followed every lead, no matter how small, but everyone led to a dead end. They interviewed ex-boyfriends, jealous co-workers, even a few conspiracy theorists who were convinced aliens were involved. There were a couple of times when they thought they had their guy. One was a local drifter with a history of violence against women. Another was a college professor who had an unhealthy obsession with one of the victims. But each time, the evidence just wasn't there. They were grasping at straws. The town, it was on edge. People were afraid to let their kids out of their sight. Women were afraid to walk alone at night. The once peaceful community was now gripped by fear and suspicion. The killer had cast a long shadow over Maplewood, and it seemed like it would never go away. Section 5. Grainy Hope. The breakthrough in the surveillance tapes. Imagine staring at grainy security footage for hours on end, your eyes straining to make out any detail. Days blurring together, coffee cups piling up, the clock ticking away as you search for a needle in a haystack. That was the life of these detectives, a relentless pursuit of justice, no matter the cost. But they kept at it, reviewing footage from traffic cameras, ATM machines, and any other source they could find. Even security cameras from businesses miles away from the crime scenes were scrutinized. They were looking for anything at all that could provide a clue, a lead, a breakthrough. Then one day, a break. A moment of clarity amidst the chaos. A detective, let's call him Miller, was at the heart of this breakthrough. He's hunched over his monitor, eyes bloodshot from staring at the screen for too long, fatigue etched on his face. He's about to call it a night when he notices something in the corner of one of the videos, something that catches his eye. A car, a nondescript sedan, nothing special at first glance, but it's in the background of 3 different abduction videos, a common thread in the chaos. Always parked just out of sight, almost as if it was hiding in plain view. Miller, he's got this feeling, that gut instinct that cops get, telling him this is important. He runs the plates and what do you know? The results are surprising. The car is registered to a John Smith living right there in Maplewood. Could this be it? Could this be the lead they've been searching for? Could this be the break they've been waiting for? The moment that turns the tide in their favor? Section 6. From pixels to a person. Identifying the monster in the shadows. John Smith. Sounds pretty average, right? But something about him, it just felt off. The more they dug into his life, the more suspicious it got. He worked from home, a freelance graphic designer, which meant he had the flexibility to disappear during the day. No criminal record, but his neighbors described him as a loner, someone who kept to himself. They put him under 24/7 surveillance, followed him, tapped his phone, the whole 9 yards. They even went through his trash, man. Talk about dirty work. And slowly but surely, they started to build their case. They found receipts for a burner phone that matched the one used to contact the victims. They found fibers in his car that matched the clothing of one of the missing women. The evidence was mounting, but it was all circumstantial. They needed something concrete, something to tie him directly to the crimes. They needed a slam dunk. Section 7. The walls close in. The final days before the arrest. The cops, they knew they were playing a dangerous game. Every move had to be calculated, every step meticulously planned. They couldn't tip their hand, couldn't let Smith know they were onto him. The element of surprise was their only advantage. They needed to catch him red-handed, or at least get enough evidence to put him away for good. The stakes were high, and failure was not an option. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every officer felt the weight of the case pressing down on them. One night, Smith, he makes a mistake. A small slip, but enough to set the wheels in motion. He leaves his apartment, gets into his car, and starts driving. The cops, they were ready, waiting for this exact moment. The cops, they're on him like white on rice. They follow him, keeping a safe distance, their hearts pounding in their chests. They follow him to a secluded wooded area outside of town, the darkness of the night adding to the suspense. He gets out of his car, and in his hand he's carrying a shovel. That's when they knew. They had him. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. They swooped in, arrested him right there on the spot. The culmination of weeks of hard work and sleepless nights. Turns out he'd been using that wooded area to dispose of the bodies. A chilling revelation that sent shivers down their spines. The cops, they found all 7 victims buried in shallow graves. Each discovery more heartbreaking than the last. It was a gruesome discovery, man, but at least the families finally had some answers. The long nightmare was over, and justice, though delayed, was finally served. Section 8. Justice served. The trial and sentencing. The trial was a media circus. Cameras everywhere, reporters fighting for quotes, the families of the victims demanding justice. Smith, he pleaded not guilty, of course. Claimed he was being framed, that he was just a patsy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The DNA, the surveillance footage, the witnesses who had seen him with the victims. The jury didn't buy his act for a second. After a grueling trial, the jury came back with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. 7 counts of first-degree murder. The judge, he didn't hold back. He sentenced Smith to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He called him a monster, a predator, a danger to society. And you know what? He was right. Was justice served? I don't know, man. Can you really call it justice when 7 innocent lives have been lost? But at least this piece of garbage was off the streets, locked away where he couldn't hurt anyone else. Section 9. Scars that remain. The aftermath of a nightmare. The town of Maplewood, it tried to move on. They held vigils for the victims, offered counseling to the families, tried to rebuild their shattered sense of security. But the scars of that nightmare, they ran deep. People were still afraid to let their kids walk home from school alone. They still looked twice over their shoulder when they were walking alone at night. The families of the victims, they were devastated. Their lives were shattered, ripped apart by a senseless act of violence. They faced years of grief, of anger, of trying to make sense of the senseless. Some found solace in their faith, others in therapy, others in the support of their loved ones. But one thing was for sure, their lives would never be the same. The pain of their loss would stay with them forever. The monster who took their loved ones might be locked away, but the memory of his crimes would continue to haunt them. Section 10. Could it have been prevented? Examining the case for clues. In the aftermath of any tragedy, the question always arises. Could it have been prevented? In the case of John Smith, there were definitely red flags. He was a loner, socially awkward, with a dark sense of humor. He spent hours online, often in chat rooms and on forums dedicated to violent and disturbing topics. Could someone have noticed these warning signs? Could a family member, a friend, a co-worker have intervened? It's impossible to say for sure. But one thing is clear. We need to do a better job of recognizing the signs of potential violence and taking action before it's too late. We need to teach our children about online safety, about the dangers of talking to strangers, about the importance of protecting their personal information. We need to create a culture where people feel comfortable coming forward if they see something that seems off, if they're concerned about someone's behavior. Section 11. Never forget honoring the victims and the fight for justice. The story of John Smith is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the shadows, even in the most ordinary of places. It's a reminder that evil can wear many faces, that monsters can hide in plain sight. But it's also a reminder of the importance of vigilance, of community, of never giving up hope. We must never forget the victims of this tragedy, Sarah, Emily, and the 5 other innocent lives that were cut short. We must honor their memory by continuing to fight for justice, by working to prevent future tragedies, by creating a world where everyone feels safe and protected. The fight against evil is never over, but together, we can make a difference. We can be the light that shines in the darkness, the hope that guides us through the shadows. We can create a world where stories like this one are never told.